A female sprinter for Team USA has tested positive for a performance-enhancing drug. 32-year-old Debbie Dunn has removed herself from the team while a backup urine sample is tested. She tested positive for a banned synthetic testosterone. Dunn finished fourth in the 400-meter event at the track and field trials just a few weeks back. She was in a pool of runners for the U.S. 4x400-meter relay team for the upcoming London Games.
And this is interesting. A so-called doping control officer for the 2002 Winter Olympics in Utah says he's not surprised about that positive drug test.
In fact, he says it often happens to athletes on the back end of their careers when he says they really have nothing to lose. NBC7's Artie Ojeda talked with him today, and Artie, you have more on the impact of these performance-enhancing drugs.
This is a very interesting story. Harvey, who is a former mayor of Del Mar, has tested dozens of athletes. He's now written a fictional book about a doctor who discovers the first genetically engineered super athlete, a cyclist. And he knows inevitably readers will think Lance Armstrong. Armstrong, of course, is right now under investigation by the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. Stepping beyond the fiction of his book, Shapiro has some very strong opinions about Armstrong. He says the question he's most often asked is Lance Armstrong a cheater? Shapiro offers a carefully thought out answer, but the bottom line, yes, he thinks Lance Armstrong has used performance-enhancing drugs.
The circumstantial evidence is just gathering and gathering and gathering. As a medical doctor, when I looked at him, I would say, you don't come back from testicular cancer with muscle wasting and suddenly get as good as he got. Not unless there's some special gift from God or from a syringe.
With millions of dollars at stake, Armstrong and the U.S. Doping Agency are in a fierce legal battle. Shapiro says Armstrong's biggest performance-enhancing drug today are his lawyers, who are trying to keep his cycling records intact. And coming up with the news at 6, I'll have more from Harvey Shapiro on the upcoming Olympics and the cat and mouse game athletes play with the Anti-Doping Agency. And it's not something that we like to talk about, but as we've just seen, and it's been reinforced by the story that we reported on this sprinter testing positive, it's part of the reality and something that we all have to reconcile.
Sure is. All right, we'll see you at 6. Thanks, Artie.
Well, 2 weeks before the start of the Olympics, a U.S. Olympic sprinter has tested positive for steroids. Debbie Dunn is a sprinter on the women's 4x400-meter team. She tested positive for a banned synthetic testosterone. She removed herself from the team pending a test of a backup urine sample. Meanwhile, a local doctor who has tested Olympic athletes before says he's not surprised. NBC7's Artie Ojeda is here with more on what he has to say. Artie.
Mark, Harvey Shapiro is a retired medical doctor who is a former mayor of Del Mar and has tested dozens of athletes. He served as the doping control officer at the 2002 Winter Games in Park City, Utah. Shapiro has written a fictional book about a doctor who discovers the first genetically engineered super athlete, but he has some very strong opinions about real-life Olympic athletes and doping. For starters, he says, absolutely 100% there are athletes right now using illegal performance-enhancing substances. He talks about the cat and mouse game athletes play, trying to stay a step ahead of drug testing, and he wonders, with thousands of advertising dollars and endorsements at stake, how determined really are we in trying to catch the cheaters? He says the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency remains remarkably underfunded. And what about us as viewers, looking forward to the excitement and buzz of the Olympics and watching athletes perform at their highest ability?
You and I play into it too, because we're looking for the excitement of a world's record. We're not staying up till 11 o'clock at night to watch the finals and something, to see somebody win from out or wherever at a time that doesn't even compute to us in terms of the performances that we're used to.
Shapiro says, in a sense, we're prepared to handle the cheating. It's part of the game, he says. Not something most of us want to take to heart, but with today's news of a sprinter testing positive for steroids, certainly something to think about. Artie Ojeda, NBC7.
Thanks, Artie.
Olympic topic is back in the headlines. A U.S. sprinter withdraws from the team because of doping allegations. NBC7's Stephen Luke is here with perspective. You talked to a local expert, Stephen, who definitely isn't pulling any punches on this topic.
Catherine, when we watch the world's greatest athletic event in the coming weeks, how can we be so sure that every athlete is legit? It's a good question. And this former doping control officer says we can't, because simply they aren't. Sprinter Debbie Dunn, expected to be part of one of USA's strongest locks for a gold medal on the 4x400 team, is stepping down after testing positive for steroids.
And so it's a cat and mouse game.
Harvey Shapiro tested dozens of athletes at the O2 Winter Games in Park City, Utah. He's, quote, 100% sure we'll see other athletes in London who've used doping as an edge.
And often it's the people who are on the edge, they're marginal. They don't do it as smart. They're not as well funded. They don't have their own little private laboratory in their pocket, so they're going to get caught.
For perspective, the number of athletes busted in Beijing actually went down from the Athens Games.
We are investing substantial sums in our anti-doping program. I think that's part of the reason that you're seeing less and less. But the truth is, we have to continue to be vigilant, and we will.
With past Olympians like Marion Jones and Ben Johnson being stripped of medals, there's proof ethics has top spot on the podium. In London, the World Anti-Doping Agency just gave its seal of approval to the lab, which will process an estimated 6,000 samples. But Shapiro says numbers don't always tell the story of who's winning the war on performance-enhancing drugs.
If you look at it, you say, gosh, so much doping in '88 and then nothing 4 years later. You scratch your head and go, what's the story here? The story is they're using something else.
A renowned German researcher actually estimated recently at an anti-doping conference that there are 80 to 100 new performance-enhancing drugs for which no tests yet exist. Still, roughly 1 out of every 2 athletes in London will be tested. It's their hopes of keeping the focus on the countless athletes who are playing by the rules. Stephen Luke, NBC7 News.
Stephen, thank you.